Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of the Incredible Halt podcast. Like the rest of the world, I'm absolutely obsessed with Sinners and wanted to talk about it in a much longer form than I've been doing on TikTok. So I brought my friend Julian Newman along, and we don't have a great name for this, but we're going to do Sinners in 3 parts. And so we're going to talk about the movie. We're going to compare it to another horror movie from 2025 and how we might use what we learned from Ryan Coogler to fix this movie, and then talk a little bit about what makes an incredible genre film. I hope you dig this episode of the Incredible Hulk podcast. As I said, my dear friend Julian Newman is on the podcast, and I want to continue to give a little bit of an explanation. So Julian and I have been wanting to do, we've obviously been friends for a long time. We've done a number of podcasts together, but we've always wanted to do something talking about movies. And so we've been trying to figure out how to do this. And Sinners seemed like the perfect jumping off point to do this because it was the next one up. Both of us went into it not having any idea how much it would change our lives, which we'll get into in a second. But what we're about to do is we're going to do this podcast in 3 acts. We're going to talk about Sinners. We have picked a movie that we think, if we made a couple of tweaks, could be much better in the horror genre than it was. And then we're going to kind of break down what a horror movie is as far as like kind of the beats and those sorts of things, and what worked in Sinners and what doesn't work in Wolfman. Julian, did I get all of that?
Man, that's good, man. That's excellent. I'm excited to be able to get into this today.
So I want to start at the beginning, and I mean that quite literally, because when this movie is announced, you and I have very different responses. Because I was like, first of all, we have one similar response. It's Ryan Coogler, take my money. But then after that, we diverged dramatically because I'm like, Ryan Coogler and vampires, and it seems to be something taking place in the 20s/30s. Here's all my money. I will see you on day one. And that was not your response?
No, man. Like you said, Ryan Coogler is the man. You know, I love Ryan Coogler. You love Ryan Coogler. There's not been a movie that he's done that I haven't thought was amazing. But, you know, the church boy in me did not want to watch a movie entitled Sinners. I'm not a huge horror guy. You know this. We've had a lot of conversations about it. And I didn't want to see Michael B. Jordan play 2 characters. You've seen, I've seen, we've all seen movies where there's one actor playing 2 people, and it almost always is bad. And so going into the film, I was thinking, I don't want to. I hope this doesn't devolve into a seance. Okay, my mama is gonna not be happy about that. The second thing is, I like Michael B. Jordan. I just don't want to see him not do a good job in this movie directed by, you could argue he is the greatest American director under 40 years old right now in the game. That includes everybody. And so I watched the movie, you watched the movie, I was blown away. And all the things that I thought going into the film, I was wrong. And I'm very happy that I was wrong. And Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan were right.
It is a stunning film. This is dumb to say just because it really hasn't been a great year. So this doesn't actually give it the weight it deserves. Yeah. It's the best film this year, and there isn't a close second, but it's probably the best thing I've seen in 10 years, maybe. If I took out 10 like Christopher Nolan stuff, because I'm a huge Nolan fan, I would say this is easily the best thing I've seen in a decade, and certainly the easily one of the best original films I've seen in like forever.
Mm-hmm. Eric, the multi-dimensional nature of this film. So one, it's beautiful. Okay, so one, it's beautiful to look at. The costuming is extraordinary. Ruth Carter, Oscar winner, did this film. She also did Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and many of Spike Lee's films. It's beautiful to look at. It's well acted, but the movie has something to say. But it has something to say, but it's not ham-handed in saying it. Very subtle, very artful. From the conversation about race, you and I were talking about the scene where Delroy Lindo, Delta, was it Delta Slim?
Yeah. Yep.
They're in the car, and Preacher Boy is in the back. Stack is driving, and they're having a conversation about an experience that he had with a person in the group that they were playing music with.
Because they drove by the chain gang to set the whole thing up.
Yes. And Delroy Lindo is describing this, and it's this tragic story. And under the tragic story, we actually hear sounds of what he's describing. The train, the music. It ends in a lynching. And then Delroy Lindo starts to just react, man. And then Stack says to Preacher Boy, you got that guitar in your hand. I just learned this yesterday or the day before. That whole end of that scene was completely improv. When they went into that song, that was not in the script. They just were flowing with it. And wow.
Which is fascinating because Ryan, obviously, Proximity Media is his company, but they have a podcast called In Proximity, and they've been doing a series of podcasts breaking down pieces of this film. So if you like the super nerdy stuff, like you want to know the difference between the IMAX film and the other camera that they used, all that stuff's in the podcast. But one of the things they talked about when they were talking about using the different cameras is they had done a couple test shots with those scenes, maybe not that one in particular, where they were doing it on a green screen and it didn't work. And like, nope, we've got to be on a road. We've got to rig this whole thing up and do it for real because it doesn't work here. And I think those choices, similar to, I know you're kind of a Star Wars fan, but similar to what's happening with Andor is like doing these physical sets makes it feel lived in. Because one of the things I walked away from, and I think I said this to you, is this film works if we never get to vampires. It's just as good if we never even get to the end of the film. You're like, this is an incredible story about these two humans coming back to the Delta, right? Like it, and yes. I want you to come up with it, and I'm not being literal, right? But like, come up with a short list of films that if you took the third act out, you still love it. I'll wait. Yeah. Right?
Eric, that is such a great point. Because you're right, the movie works without vampires. In fact, there's a part when I watched it, you know that something's about to jump off. So the vampire element has already been introduced, but they're in the juke joint and everybody's having a great time. And there's a part of it that you don't want that to end. You don't want that to stop. It's almost like, and I almost felt like it was Wakanda in miniature, where there was this place that was safe. It was a place of creativity. It was a place of relationship and dancing and whatever, and celebration. And it's like, that at some point, the vampire thing is going to introduce itself. And I felt so connected to these characters, man, that I just didn't want to see something bad happen to them. And it just, excellent.
And you and I were talking before the podcast started. The film starts, and I had to pick my jaw up off the floor, because when you get introduced originally to Smoke and Stack, if you've not seen this movie already, we're already into spoilers. But when you get introduced to them, there is this movie magic that happens that, sure, we could tell you all of the tricks and the way that they framed it, like the way that they did it, but who cares? I was just like, I'm 2 minutes into this film and I'm leaning forward going, what in the hell are we doing right now? What are we doing right now? This is incredible. And no one has said anything, right? They hadn't bought the juke joint, like you didn't have the racism coming. Like there's none of that happen. It's just two characters sharing a cigarette. And I'm like, yep,
Man,
this is why I'm here.
Like you said, the movie magic, the technology, the wizardry, whatever. I think they said that he had to wear like a halo. There was all these things they did to facilitate the technology to make it look so seamless. But at no point, once the movie started, and again, I came in predisposed against Michael B. Jordan playing two guys. As I got in the movie, I wasn't thinking about him playing two guys. I was thinking about the two guys. At no point do I see Michael B. Jordan. I see these two guys, Smoke and Stack, who are brothers, and that opening introduction when they're sharing the cigarette is just, it's beautiful because not only does it do everything we're talking about from a technology standpoint, but the subtext of it is their relationship, that they're so in sync that we're doing stuff in coordination without even looking at the other guy.
Yeah, because the other scene that blew me away, and it's I mean, if you want to nitpick, it's a little on the nose, right? When they kill the rattlesnake, right? But then when they toss the knife in that scene and it comes across, right? Like movie magic, that scene is cut in half, right? But they're throwing a knife through the two scenes to kill the snake. Stunning.
Yeah.
Stunning. The other thing I want to talk about, obviously, is that scene midway through the juke joint, the music scene, which, there's two moments in this film that almost any other director you could think of would make it cringy. The one person playing two people is easy to make cringy. And this scene rides a razor's edge from being the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life or the cringiest thing you've ever seen on film. It obviously lands in the genius. Like, I mean, again, another moment where you're like, I don't even know what I'm a part of, but I'm thankful I'm here. Right. But that's a scene that takes a deft hand to not only figure out, right. He was talking in the podcast this week about how they did a bunch of flyovers using iPhones to make sure they had the pacing before they brought in the cameras and all of that stuff. But wow, just wow.
I was stunned by that.
That's the word, right?
I was stunned by that scene because you said it well. I don't think there's anybody else that could have done that in a way that it didn't feel like, man, really? We're doing this? Because this is a period piece. This period piece has, everything that comes along with 1932 Mississippi. Okay.
Yep.
All of it. All right. And you're going to sit there and put a scene in there when we have people crumping and we have, rap music and what look like Bootsy Collins in there. Like you're going to throw this in the middle of a juke joint right now. To describe it, it sounds ridiculous and absurd. It sounds like the type of thing like, no, don't do that. But when it was done, it took my breath away. It was one of the most audacious cinematic choices in movie that I've ever seen in my life. I'm getting tingles just thinking about it. I mean, you and I are both movie geeks, which is why we're here today. But it was extraordinary. And then I forget the composer's name. Is it Ludwig?
I'm huge. Ludwig Göransson. Yes.
Okay. So not only are we the visuals, right? And you're a music guy. So the music morphs and starts to shift and change and reflect what we're seeing. It was amazing. Like when I wanted to watch it again. Like, can we do that again? Can we stop it, run it back? Let's do that again.
And I've been thinking about this since I saw the film is like, because one of the knocks that he gets is obviously like, he always works with Michael B. Jordan and he always has Ludwig Göransson, right? And it's got the same director of photography and all that stuff. But I walked out of it thinking something completely different. I walked out of that thinking like, if you have the right collaborators that you collaborate with continuously, you can't help but create profound pieces of work. I mean, Ludwig has the same creative with Nolan. He's done a bunch of stuff with Nolan, which he got to because of COVID. He was available and John Williams was not available, right? Like that's how that happens. And they've worked on a bunch of films, but this one is special. They went to film school together, right? Like they're special together. And that Lied to You track that kicks off that musical interlude or whatever we would call it in a screenplay, Ludwig and Raphael Sadiq wrote that in 20 minutes. Like Raphael had this idea forever and Ludwig unlocked it and then they sent it to him in an iPhone like audio note and here we are.
That scene was so powerful. It was moving. It was it was extraordinary. It was breathtaking and it was like, wow. Let's just send them all the awards. Let's send them all the stuff because
100%. But here's where it gets interesting, and then I want to ask you a question about Remick. Here's where it gets interesting. Horror movies don't win awards, right? We don't give them awards because it's a lower form of filmmaking, right? Which I think fits into the entire package that he's creating right now. Like the genre is a lower, right? Like he's creating this class system and making comments on class system. And this genre is one of those that gets commented on a lot. I want to pivot though very quickly. And I want to get your thoughts on Remick as a character, because, you know, when you compare the African-American plight in the United States and the Irish plight 1,300 years ago from when this movie starts, right? So Remick is 1,300 years old and has gone through some stuff in Ireland that mimics what's happening at that moment in America. But the question I want to ask you as you're nodding along is there's this tension here because Remick is white, right? And he's taking the souls of his victims. But then those souls later in the film get invited into this coven where everybody is then equal. What are your thoughts on that as a black man in America who's watching this film? You have a different lens than I do. And I looked at this thing and went like, I don't know necessarily how to unpack this because there's parts of this that create a tension.
Man, Eric, what I love about the film is because one of the many things I love about the film is it's not this or that, it's this, that, this, and that. It's a horror film, but it's also a period piece. It's a musical. It's also a dissertation about race in America in history. But it's also about the collective suffering of oppressed people, which is what you're talking about. And so I was a conflicted viewer because I looked at it through the lens of historical racism and colonialization and the not just the when I talk about colonization, I'm not talking about colonization of lands. I'm talking about colonization of talent, colonization of gifts. When he says, I want your songs and I want your stories.
It's that idea of the culture vulture, right?
Yeah,
like that's the, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, that makes sense to me. You know, I get that. But Ryan Coogler makes it an Irishman who comes from a history of oppression himself. So he's both the colonizer of worlds, but he's also someone who can relate to the struggle and maybe being colonized himself. And so he's a very he's an interesting villain because he feels a little Thanos-y.
Sure.
In the sense that Killmonger, Thanos, you can understand what they're saying, and there's an element to what they're proposing that's right. Their execution or their process is twisted. You know, why didn't Thanos say, okay, I'm gonna snap my fingers and have more resources versus eliminating half of whatever? Killmonger, how can I bring people together and not have an isolated world. With Remick, it's like you want to build community where everybody has equality and equity, but bro, you got to kill them first in order to receive it. And I think what is the one part where he talks about, it's right at the doorway, I think, when he's inviting everybody in and he starts to talk about, hey man, I get it. I understand. This is the deal. So long answer to a short question, I was conflicted because I think that just like that conversation is multidimensional and complicated and nuanced, I think the story of humanity, when it comes to race, when it comes to class, when it comes to culture, when it comes to colonization, when it comes to gifts, talents, and arts, it's complicated and it's nuanced, and it's not all one thing. It's a lot of things at the same time.
So a couple other things I want to hit on before we go to Act 2. I don't know if you saw this, but if you go to the Sinners official Spotify page, they have the actual news articles hidden in there that you can read. And so there's a news article that's talking about this ship that came in from Ireland where all of these people were found dead on board, which is clearly, Remick turning people into some vampires. There's a whole bunch of stories about how we get the Irish beer and the Italian wine as Smoke and Stack are making these two mobs in Chicago collide with one another, because obviously that's where the money comes from. So if you're interested in kind of some backstory, you can get that
awesome.
You can get that off Spotify, which I thought was really, really cool. The other thing, and I know I texted this to you, that has to be, if you love music, and that's the one caveat for this film. If you don't think music is powerful, I don't think this film works. Yeah. I don't think you'll buy into it. Like if you've never heard a song that made you cry or gave you goosebumps or saw a live, if that's never happened to you, I don't think this works for you, because you have to buy into the premise that a song can pierce the veil, both literally and metaphorically, right? That said, if you're there and you're seeing it for the second or third time, you're a music human. That is the coolest mid-credit scene I've ever seen, save for when Samuel L. Jackson shows up as Nick Fury for the first time. But
okay,
Buddy Guy being the guitarist at the end, like forget about it.
That was beautiful. I do have a question for you, okay? Before we go into that part of it, I want to ask you, were there anything in the movie that are nitpicks or little things you're like, I didn't dislike it, I didn't hate it, but I wish fill in the blank? Are there any wish fill in the blank?
I have a wish. I don't have a nitpick. I haven't seen it twice. I'm going to see it tonight for a second time. So as they say in the industry, I have no notes. But I do have a wish. One of the most interesting parts of the whole film is when you're introduced to Remick and he kind of falls out of the sky and his skin is bubbling because it's still sunlight. But immediately after that, the Choctaws show up because they're hunting him. I want a prequel with just them hunting vampires. Like, if I have one thing out of this film that I want, it's that. I absolutely need to know more about those humans, like in a way that it bothers me greatly. Like, if there's one thing about that film that I walked away and went, if I could wish one and a half things. The other thing is, like, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to live in this world for a long time. But the thing that I was missing is I need to spend some time with them.
Same. I feel the exact same as you did, in the sense that I really wanted them to come back. Maybe at the end, I wanted them to come back. I felt like their presence was so powerful, and I was sad that they didn't come back and they weren't reintroduced. So I completely agree with you on that. I thought it was so interesting when he asked the question, "Hey, is he in there?" No, he's like, "All right, we're out." You know what I mean? I'm not gonna ask you twice. I'm leaving now. The one thing I wished, again, this is not a nitpick, it's more of I wish fill in the blank. I wish there was more explanation about, and maybe I missed it, about the veil the music and gifts and talent being able to transition. I wish there was a little bit more about that for me. It could be argued like, dude, the movie was what, 2.5 hours long. I mean, how much more do you need? But I wish there was a little bit more backstory about that, and I do wish the Choctaw was reintroduced.
And
But
I
think
just
a prequel would
wonder,
be
I
beautiful.
wonder though if the piercing the veil, and this is total speculation on my point, I don't actually know. Like, I wonder if that leans into some of the blues mythologies of these great guitarists making the deal with the devil so that they can
Yeah.
play guitars in ways that, like, I wonder if that, like, it's sort of obtuse because it's a nod to where this music came from and some of the mythologies around blues music itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Masterpiece, loved it, absolutely extraordinary.
Do you think, last question, then we'll move on to Wolfman. Do you think they should build a franchise around this, or do you think they should stop? Because you have two films here you could easily make. You could make a prequel that follows Remick, and then the Choctaw can show up because obviously they've probably been chasing him all over America at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you could follow the vampires that I don't want to spoil everything forever, but the vampires that are left at the end of the film, you could follow them if you wanted to, because we jump from 1932 to 1992.
Yeah, I think that here's what I would say. I would say that normally, I mean, no sequels. Let's not mess it up. But these stories are so different that I think they almost stand in their. They're almost different movies that are connected. The through line is the story, but they're almost their own films. So a prequel that you described would be beautiful. The 90s version of the vampires, that would be an interesting film.
I have one more for you.
Yeah.
I want a show on Max of Smoke and Stack working for Al Capone.
Man. Yeah. Yeah. And that just speaks to the density of this film. Like you just came up with 3 different entities that we would all be cool with. Like, yes, let's watch that show. Yes, let's watch what happened on that boat and how he got connected to the Choctaw. Yes, let's talk about the 90s vampires. Like, those are all in this film, man. Ryan Coogler, ladies and gentlemen.
Last question. I know I've said this 3 times, but this is the one that this is his first original thing since he did some short films, like Fig, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think he's created his own? I don't know another way to frame it. This is kind of cheesy, but it's the best way I could describe it. But when you think of, like, if I told you to close your eyes and think of Wes Anderson or Tarantino or Nolan, there's a vibe. You know it instantly, right? And he's worked so long on established IP, not Fruitvale Station, but like Creed and Black Panther. I'm wondering, does this start to form that like signature where you're like that? Yeah, that's his, and maybe it's the music. I don't know. Like, it's like,
yeah, I think that his signature for me is that his movies are not only what they are on the surface. He's almost like a cinematic Kendrick Lamar, where,
well, like that.
Which, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's something deeper there. There's something to see there. There's something to understand there. And he's done the research, man. And so this is not just, we're just throwing anything out there for entertainment's sake. Yes, it's entertaining. Yes, it's this, that, and the other. But there's real depth. There's real roots to these branches that we're looking at and we're dealing with that is phenomenal. So I think for me, his signature is whether it's Panther, because, he took Black Panther and then he started in Oakland, California. You know what I'm saying? He that was very unique to him. And as a person who grew up in Northern California, that meant something to me. And so he brings a depth to his creativity that is not only critically successful, it mixes genres and is very commercially successful. He's, you know, you look at a Jordan Peele, like you talked about a Tarantino. You look at, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson, who's got a movie coming out, and you have Nolan, Christopher Nolan. Everybody has their vibe. I guess what I would say that there's so many things that separate Coogler, and I think it's because his movies seem to be challenging the establishment, establishing conventional wisdom in a way that is powerful and is beautiful.
Love it. All right. So in Act 2, we're going to take a film from 2025 that's in the same genre. In this case, I know there's like 5 genres in Sinners. We're going to take horror as the genre. And we're going to talk about a film that it was absolutely unsuccessful and maybe, well, I mean, it made $10 million its opening weekend, right? Like, and get into the why. So we're going to talk about Wolfman. It's the third Wolfman. There was a 2010 version and then a 1941 version, I believe was the actual date. The 2010 and the 1940 version kind of dance with each other a little bit. The plot lines are fairly similar. What we're doing here is we're building a universe of these classic monsters. Think Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein. In this case, we started with Blumhouse. It started with 2, The Invisible Man, which I loved. I thought there was a lot to love about that film. And this was the second one. And I did not love it. I did not love it at all. And I think what we should do here, Julian, is maybe dance with the parts that we would change. Mm-hmm. And if you'll allow me, I would like to make the first change.
Yes, go ahead.
So the thing that works for me, and this is like, you're not a horror fan. It is my favorite genre. So I'm I fall victim. I fall victim to what I'm about to tell you all the time, because when you see a lot of films, it's hard to fool you or hard to pull you in to what's going to happen. And the 2 things that I'll only pick one, but there's 2 things in this film that are broken that hamstring the film. The one I'm going to talk about is, the ending well before you get there. And the change I would like to make is the prelim, the prequel, the prelude. That's the word I'm looking for. The prelude needs to be 8 minutes shorter. It needs to be just that last minute in the deer blind with no explanation. And then he gets on the radio and we cut to black. So I don't know who he is. I don't know who the kid is. And then the movie starts. It's way too long, way too much exposition, way too much we get like the unpacking of the drama it's almost 15 minutes long before the actual film, before we get any Wolfmanning, right? So my first change would shorten that up, make it more gray and clouded. So I don't really know what's going on, but I know that there's a creature in the woods and the dad is obsessed with the creature. And I don't even know he's your dad. This old man is obsessed with the creature and we fade to black. Mm-hmm. Your turn.
That's good. Okay. My change would be, and this is this is coming from a guy that doesn't do horror, but back in the day, I used to watch with my dad, like the old Abbott and Costello movies in black and white.
Yep.
And so there's a classic with Wolfman, Dracula, and Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't like the way the Wolfman looked. And I think I understand why they made him look more human than werewolf, because the whole tension between him as a father and his daughter and everything. So I think I understand why that happened, but it didn't feel scary to me once you kind of revealed what the Wolfman looked like. And it didn't make me laugh, but there was no, there was no terror. There was no specter of, I wish he looked more, I would want him to look more werewolfy with human understanding to us. So how do we get the humanity through the werewolf?
Yep.
But he looked so much like a regular dude with just like an old school makeup kit that you could get from like Party City or something.
Yep.
It never for me got to a place where I felt afraid for them, and that would be my switch.
It's the Wolfman and Gal Gadot's Evil Queen shopped at the same Party City to get their costuming for.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't feel. I love the irony of the protector being the one you need to be protected against, but he wasn't scary enough for me. As an entity once he switched.
And I think that's one of the things about horror is when you're going to like raise your hand and say, this is a creature feature, I need to see a creature, and that creature needs to make an impact. It can't be, creature by committee, which is clearly what that was. Like, well, what if he still has his shirt? Sure, he can keep his shirt. What if he just looks like he didn't shave or whatever, right? Yeah. Like,
you're right. He did. Exactly. Didn't he still have his like normal outfit on?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
What if he shops at he's a werewolf who shops at J. Crew. What if he does that? Then we could get a sponsorship and we could run some influencer marketing on TikTok. The last thing I will say about this film is the other two Wolfman films rely heavily on either unrequited love or a love interest that doesn't work out because you're a wolf, right? Mm-hmm. This has potential, right? They're a marriage that's in chaos, and one of the things about horror is that pressure cooker. It keeps moving the characters closer and closer into tinier spaces to get it to boil over, but we never get any time because we spend 15 minutes with dad yelling at his son to shoot the deer, and then we're in New York City for 6 whole minutes before it's werewolf time, right? So we don't build the tension in the right way. We just build it when we get to sort of wolf guy.
Yeah, to me, it's believability, man. I liked him better as the father.
Yep.
I liked him as the dad. I didn't like him as the werewolf. And I thought they did some interesting things with him transitioning. What they did in terms of his...
I thought the camera tricks for that were really cool. Like, there were some moments.
Yeah.
Did you see that
he switched over? Yeah.
Did you see the dad thing coming?
Here's what's funny, and this is going to sound really elementary. I try to watch movies only operating with the information that's given to me. So I try to stay very present in the now, and unless I'm really hating a film, I don't jump ahead. So I could have figured out the dad thing, but I mentally chose, and I always do my best to try to stay like, this is what you're telling me is the truth, and I'm going to operate in the truth that you're operating in. So I didn't mentally jump ahead to the dad, even though what you just said about the prologue, that's so extensively, it's super long. And what you just talked about, if you cut it down, keep it mysterious, that changes the tone of the film. And you could even slice that 15 minutes into flashbacks throughout the movie.
Yep.
Because that would have brought tension.
Because the only thing you have to show them is the tattoo. That's the only thing you have to show them in the whole film, is that there's a tattoo and we make the right. You either do or don't make the connection. Okay, so last part of today's episode, I kind of wanted to go through some of the beats and what makes these films work or not work. And I want to start with Sinners, because I think Sinners, I don't know this for sure, I have not been able to gut check this, but a typical Western, you and I are storytellers, so a typical Western style story is beginning, middle, and end with rising action to middle, descending action to end, and we're done. But as I said earlier, this film works as a period gangster film without vampires, and I think because it uses an Eastern style of storytelling called Ki Sho Tenketsu. I think I have that right. But this is 4 parts instead of 3, so it's an intro, it's a development, we build the world, And we do this for a while until we get to the twist, which is the vampire. And then you get to the conclusion. And I think that's one of the things that makes Sinners stand out with so many people and feel so different, is because it's not Kendrick Lamar is a great example, right? The beats aren't hitting where you think they're supposed to be, which makes the song cooler. Right? They're sort of like, they're sort of shoes in the dryer. They're still upbeat, but they're shoes in the dryer as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so Sinners is one of those stories that's shoes in the dryer. They're not, the beats aren't where they're supposed, they're there. They're just not where they're supposed to be. Those vampires should be much earlier. We're 42 minutes in before we even know that there's a vampire. 42 minutes. And this is not a 3-hour film, right? So I think when you're talking about the horror genre, this is one that can make it stand out because you're twisting something that is typical, where Wolfman is a literal rising action, falling action, and we're done. And the other thing is, when you're dealing with horror, one of the key components, and both of these do this, is it has to center around the characters facing death in the face. That's the tension. And that can look like anything, but they have to face death in the face. And what I think works well with Sinners, and jump in here at any point that you want to, is that Smoke has to face death twice. Because he survives a vampire attack to then be attacked by the KKK. Right? Because Stack is gone at this point. We don't know what happened to him, but he's out of the picture when the sun comes up. And everybody is gone. We send Sammy back to church, right? And then there's a whole nother act that has to come to resolution. He has to face it twice, which gives you this whole other tension because you don't get any chance to breathe. The guy that you're rooting for survived the vampire attack. End credits. And he's like, nope, not end credits. And a bunch of white guys who are going to try to burn this club down.
Man, I know. Here's what's interesting about that scene, though, is that, remember, he takes off the bag of protection. And he's like, listen, I'm going out. You know what I mean? I don't want to live in a world without any.
Do you think it's that, or he is it that, or he thinks nothing worse could happen at this point?
That's a great question, and it goes back to what we said earlier about it's many different things. So when I think about that last scene, he takes off the bag, which has protected him. So I'm going with no protection because I don't want to live in a world where Annie doesn't exist, my child is gone, and I'm no longer my brother. And remember when he said, I don't know if it was Smoke or Stack, it might have been Stack. He said, there is no me without you.
Yeah.
And there was a couple moments when Stack was in vampire mode where Smoke looks very anguished because he's not helping his brother. And here's the thing, and I actually heard this, is okay, so their names are Elias and Elijah, right?
I think so.
So Elijah is Smoke, Elias is Stack. Elijah, for us people that have awareness of the Old Testament, the biblical Old Testament, Elijah did not die. Elijah transitioned into the supernatural, the afterlife, without dying. So it is argued that this was very Elijah in a sense that after he was shot, he moved into the afterlife where Andy already was there, Chow was there, this, that, and the other. So, but the main point of what we're saying, what makes this movie work for me, and you're the horror expert, not me. I've seen very little horror films, and those that I've seen, like we say, Wolfman. But, Exorcist was amazing. I watched that in film school and was blown away by that. But you got to care, man. Like, I cared for these twins. I cared when Annie got bit. That I was very
Yes.
troubled by that. And then the tension of what is Smoke going to do now that she is a vampire in process. I cared about Mary. It bothered me that she became a vampire. I cared about Delta Slim. I cared about Cornbread. And so for me, when I think about this movie, the reason why it works is because of everything you talked about, the specter of death, all that stuff. But if the specter of death is present, but I don't care about the people that are looking at the specter, then I'm not on the edge of my seat. But because I cared about everyone, and this film does such an extraordinary job of really giving 3 dimensions to every person, even if they're a minor. They're a supportive character. Cornbread,
the world, yeah.
Yeah.
It just feels it feels lived in, right? Mm-hmm. If we go back to Wolfman, we don't care about any of these people, right? Yeah. One's a journalist, I guess, sure, fine, whatever. He's a helicopter parent because of his we don't have any chance to care about them in this way, so that by the time they're in the woods, which is way too quick, you're like, yeah, sure, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Where this film is not that. This film is like I'm sure you could find people all over the planet who have a different favorite character in this film, mm-hmm. right? Who's like, that's my human, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I love Delroy Lindo. Like, again, I said this in my review, is like, here's a guy who I adore in everything, but he doesn't need to do this. He doesn't need to do this. Mm-hmm. But he absolutely swings for the fences with that role. Swings as hard as he can. Mm-hmm. And so he becomes a character where you're like, I'm all in, Absolutely. I love this guy.
Absolutely. Well, this goes back to what you just said, man. You said, okay, prequel, post, sequel, whatever. We could watch a movie in a series on HBO Max. I want to watch the Delta Slim movie. Like, I want to see the Delta Slim series. I want to see what happens to Preacher Boy, after he gets back to the church and jumps in a car and drives off.
Yep.
Like, everybody, I want to see Annie. Like, if you sit there and you think about everything that's in this film, as well as, and here we are going back to reviewing it again, or at least I am, but every person we care about, and they're 3-dimensional in a way that is so extraordinary. The shop owners,
yep,
their lives, and the daughter. And
by the way, wow. quick aside, then I want to tell you something, then we can be done. That oneer from the store and back, where they do that one tracking shot back and forth. I want you to think about this because you didn't mention it. And it just dawned on me when you were retelling the story where they're in the car and Slim is talking about the lynching at the train station. Where did they find Delta Slim?
Is he at the train station?
He's at the train station. So he's literally at the ground zero where the trauma that brings his music to life,
yeah,
and like
man.
that sort of detail of a character who is not. I mean, he's quintessential to the juke joint getting up, but he's not quintessential to the story. But you spent ink to be like, he's going to tell this story about a lynching that happens at a train station. And they happen to find him busking at a train station.
Man, I didn't even make that connection. Because you're right. Mary gets off the train and comes over.
And they turn around and he's right over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's going to be an entire class on this film, right? Not just film school talking about it for a second. Like, this will be an entire semester for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's I think about when I saw Get Out, blown away.
Yep.
When I saw Do the Right Thing, when I saw Malcolm X, when I saw Schindler's List, those films that make an impression on you. The Dark Knight, that you just go, this right here is the reason why we go to the movies.
Yep.
This is the reason why we deal with the Wolfmans and the, Madam Webbs, because we want this. And man, hats off to Ryan Coogler and the squad and everybody. This was a masterwork.
My friend, as always, a pleasure. We'll do another one next month. I don't know what we're going to do, but it won't be a Wolfman film, I promise.
Yeah, of course.